Are you planning for retirement, buying a home, sending your kids to college, or looking for ways to protect your estate assets? The Simply Advised podcast connects you to trusted professionals, subject matter experts who communicate critical information in a meaningful and memorable way to guide you to make smart choices. Listen in as our experts help you handle whatever life throws your way.
Hello and welcome to another Simply Advised podcast. Today we're going to learn about something called the bucket strategy with financial planner Mason Gorris, who is with InvestWise Financial. But before we dive into the nuts and bolts of our education today, I think it's important to find out a little bit about who Mason is, what makes him tick, and how he decided to go on this path. So Mason, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about your journey, my friend. How did you decide and when did you decide that being a financial planner was what you wanted to be when you grew up?
I always had a strong interest in investing. I actually opened up an investment account as early as I possibly could at the age of 18. But I always wanted to be a doctor, actually. I have an older brother who's a doctor, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps. So that was kind of my plan going into college, but ended up making a pivot, deciding I wanted to do business, but I still wanted to help people. I wanted a job that, involved me working with other people, nothing really behind the scenes. And I uncovered that financial planning is a route where, I can take my interest in investing and combine that with kind of my desire to be a doctor to help people. So I kind of uncovered this career path. It fits me and my personality really well. That's where I find myself today, now helping people not with their medical decisions, but with their financial decisions instead.
Magnificent. And, a lot of people say that helping people make decisions of their money is as important as their spirituality and their health, right? So, when you really look at the professional foundation that you have built as a financial planner, you truly help people live a more successful life. You just do it in the world of money, but you don't just do it in the world of money, which is a little bit about what we're going to talk today, because as a financial planner at InvestWise, you do talk a lot more than just money. How about we go on that before we jump into what the bucket strategy is?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, finances, there's such this taboo around talking about our money and where we're spending our money, how we're investing, things like that. It's no secret that even though, what might not be important is how much money you have, it really definitely affects all these other aspects of life. And not worrying about your money or the markets or your finances is something that's going to help other aspects of your life too. It's not fun going to bed at night thinking that something unforeseen can happen and now you have to delay a vacation or something like that. So there's definitely a psychological and emotional component to what I do as well.
And that's leading us wonderfully right into this idea of a bucket strategy, because it allows your clients ways to look at money in different ways, which is really, really important. So let's talk about the history of the bucket strategy a little bit and why and what it is.
Yeah, the bucket strategy's been around for decades. It's not it's not a brand new strategy. It's a very sound and proven strategy for kind of organizing your money and when and how it should be invested and when you want to spend it. It's just a much more simplified approach to your finances. But although simplified in its kind of way of displaying and organizing your finances, a lot goes into it. Investment strategies, taxes, Social Security, estate planning, all of that is powering this very simple and easy to understand bucket strategy. And to the previous point you made, that this strategy, and I employ this with everybody, each and every one of my clients, this allows you to kind of understand, what buckets of money you have set up for what time periods, and allows you to kind of ride out a lot of the, market ups and downs without getting too emotional about it.
Well, how many buckets are there? I mean, are we talking about 20 buckets? Are we talking about 2 buckets? How many buckets do you usually talk to your clients about?
Yeah, there's actually only 3. There's a now, soon, and later bucket. And that's as complicated as it needs to get. 3 buckets.
Okay, so let's talk about the now bucket, because it seems to me that if you just have 3 buckets, that each of these are probably going to have not only different investment philosophies, but potentially vehicles also to ensure that the philosophy between each of these buckets are going to work. So let's talk about the now bucket. What does that look like, and how does that work?
Yeah, the now bucket is your shortest term bucket, which just means it's the bucket that you're going to pull from first in case you need money other than what you might be earning from an employer, what you might be collecting from Social Security. I like to put 12 months of income in that bucket. There's kind of this rule of thumb out there that, you need 3 to 6 months of income. But a perfect example is what happened earlier this year with the the pandemic, and the market took quite a big dip. Since I have all my clients set up with a healthy 12-month time period of funding, they were able to just let their investments ride. They didn't have to touch them. They were going to this now bucket, which is primarily invested in cash. It's really nothing fancy here. We just want it safe and, importantly, liquid, which just means you can go in on a Tuesday and initiate a transaction to get the money coming out that week or shortly thereafter. It's safer money, so to speak. It's not necessarily invested in the quote unquote stock market. It might be, CDs at the bank, a credit union account. It's stable, and we know it's going to be, there for us. And it's got 12 months of funding in it.
That seems really smart to me, because a lot of times when clients call in a panic to their financial advisor like you, it really is because something is going on today in the market. So that must change the kind of communications you get from clients when the market does experience volatility.
That's exactly right. One thing that I do and I want and have to do when the market's going crazy and clients need money or start getting concerned is I need to kind of talk them off the edge, so to speak. We know that historically, one of the good strategies, if you have your finances arranged correctly, is to just wait out some sort of market downturn. We never know how long that downturn is going to be, but historically, even in some of the worst downturns, it only took a couple years, 48 to 50 months for the market to recover in many instances. So as long as you have this bucket set up, you can at least ride out. And I'll use the example again earlier this year when we had a big market decline for just a couple month time period. Well, I remind clients that, hey, we've got 12 months of funding set up here. So unless this market downturn lasts longer than 12 months, then we're totally covered with our now bucket. So it helps people stay invested and not respond emotionally to what's going on in the market. We can let our plan A and strategy that we put in place from day one guide us through many, many different market situations. And we have some backup plans in place just in case there is a really long market downturn.
Behavioral mistakes and emotional investing are things that it has been proven, Mason, over time, that the general public makes really bad decisions when it comes to their investing because they are very reactive. And it sounds to me like this bucket strategy helps the short-term emotional interactions or reactions of, oh my God, go to cash, or, oh my God, why aren't we taking advantage of these opportunities? But what is the second bucket? Because I get the third bucket because you said that was long-term money. That makes sense to me. But explain this second bucket. What is it and how does it work?
Yeah, the second bucket, we call it the soon bucket. And it is actually the most difficult to set up. It is funding for essentially after the first year. The now bucket covers the first 12 months. Well, then we fund this soon bucket, which provides 10 years worth of income. Again, the reason why we put 10 years in there is because it just gives us some pretty good odds, again, to ride out a market downturn. Statistically, over the history of the stock market, The market is not down for a 10-year time period very much. It's very rare that if you set yourself up for 10 years worth of funding, that it's going to work out, really badly for you and put you in a bad situation. So this soon bucket is 10 years worth of funding. This bucket will be invested to some extent. Not, I'll use a car analogy, not pedal to the metal, 100 miles an hour. Maybe we're driving at half capacity. Maybe we're going 50 miles an hour with this. We want some growth in this bucket. The goal is we want to beat this thing called inflation, which is just the idea that our money kind of loses value over time. I always kind of plan for 2% inflation. So with the now bucket, we're okay with getting a very, very little or no return, having that sit in a bank, because our soon bucket is going to help us protect against inflation, but it's still not going to be overly aggressive. We don't want to put ourselves in a situation where, this bucket's going to get cut in half in value in case something happens in the market. So we're trying to beat inflation. We're not trying to hit a home run with this. I kind of manage expectations and I say, let's just shoot for a 4 to 6% rate of return in this soon bucket and call it good. Let's take as much risk as we need to get to that point. But then again, we can comfortably say that, hey, as I'm retiring or approaching retirement, I've got enough money set up for a 10-year time period where in case something big does happen in the market, I'm not going to have to do what I consider to be one of the worst financial moves, which is pull money out of an account when the market's down. So 10 years is just a good, healthy buffer for that soon bucket.
So we've covered now, which is your 12 months of cash basically on hand. We've got the soon bucket, which gives them a 10-year pad, just in case there is a longer downturn in the market. Now, then you have the later bucket. And when people want to try to hit those home runs or put the pedal to the metal, is this where they have the ability to do that, Mason? Because, so much media is out there talking about, well, the S&P is blankety blank today and the Dow is blankety blank. People hear this stuff, or Facebook or Tesla is way up. I think people want to be able to participate in the market. Do you have one of these buckets that allow them to participate?
Yes, and you're exactly right. That is the later bucket. And, the later bucket's probably the easiest to solve for, because whatever you don't need in the now or soon bucket can get put in that later bucket. And now you can drive closer to 100 miles an hour. You've got 10 years in case something happens. You've got 10 years covered, and subsequently 10 years to let that later bucket accumulate as well. We all want the most return. And to your point, when you see the news coming out about the S&P and stuff like that, it doesn't make us feel good if we're only getting 5%, but other people are out there making 20, right? Well, you can make those larger returns in the later bucket, or at least give yourself the opportunity by investing that money more growth oriented. So you still feel like you're participating in the good market upturns, but you're also doing it in a very smart way. You have some money set aside, again, in that now and soon bucket, to where if things don't go according to plan, if you invest in a stock or some sort of very growth oriented, mutual fund or something, and something goes sideways, well, your now and soon bucket are going to really help you in that situation. And your later bucket, although it fluctuates more than the now and soon, that's your longer term money. You're not going to need all of your money or all of your 401k or wherever you have your money saved. You're not going to need that all within the first 10 years, or at least I'd hope you don't. So you can still, I don't want to say swing for the fences, but you can still remain growth oriented in that later bucket, capture some of that market upside potential, and also do things in this later bucket. Like think about, maybe some legacy planning or something. If you really want somebody to inherit some money someday, put that in your later bucket, your physical and mental later bucket, and invest it maybe a little more growth oriented. If it's not for you, for your now and soon bucket, keep that in the later bucket for down the road.
How hard is it, since you've been doing this for a while, how hard is it to help your clients switch those mental gears and look at it in a compartmentalized way like this? I mean, do people just look at you and they're like, "Oh, Mason, this totally makes sense. I'm 100%." Or is this something that you have to train your clients over time to continue to think in the siloed approach?
I think the beauty of this strategy versus, me just plugging things into a software and, showing the client something really confusing. The beauty is that it makes intuitive sense. Okay, yeah, segment the money, now, soon, and later. Those are easy terms to remember, but you definitely still have to train the, emotional and psychological part of your brain. And specifically when the market is going down, it's like, a lot of people, their strategy goes out the window. They just want to move everything into cash. And that's what takes some training and some managing of me managing clients' expectations, but also everybody just managing, their own expectations and emotions around their money. I go back to this strategy in tough situations, like really just, market downturns when things aren't looking so great. And I reassure people that, hey, we've got these buckets set up. We planned for this to happen. You might see the quote unquote market, or the, these market S&P 500 or Dow, that might be down 30%, but you're not down 30% in your now bucket. You might not be down that much in your soon bucket because we weren't driving that fast or trying to swing for the fences. You may be down that much in your later bucket, but again, that's your long-term bucket. We've got time for that to recover. So it definitely does take some training. It takes a couple inevitable market downturns. And a great example, again, earlier this year, where this was the first time that with some of my clients, we built this bucket strategy and they were actually seeing it kind of put to the test. And it really worked out beautifully, I think, for a lot of their emotions, because they were able to see on paper, here's my strategy. I see that I have enough money set aside. Yes, I understand my later bucket is down quite a bit, as is the whole market, but it looks like I'm covered. Thank you for reassuring me. Thank you for putting this plan in place.
Mason, I've always found it fascinating that people say, well, I have lost 30%. And using the bucket strategy, especially when you're talking about this later bucket, they haven't actually realized any losses because you're keeping that money in the market, in the bucket, in hopes that it will recover, which historically we know, I mean, that the market generally does recover and go up over time, right? I mean, since really the beginning of the markets, right? So do you have to do that? Is that part of your educational process and explaining what actual loss is compared to what they're seeing on television?
It is, yeah, and you're exactly right. A lot of people, you might see the value of your account go down, but you got to understand you have the potential to make that back. And as long as you have some money in your later bucket, still growth oriented, that later bucket will help bring that value of the portfolio back. So you really haven't experienced an actual loss unless you were to move everything into cash. And now you're out of the market with zero opportunity to make that back up. So you're exactly right. Again, the beauty of this strategy is that you've got these buckets set up, invested differently. So you can always kind of mentally tell yourself, oh, okay, the market is, going really well. Well, great. My later bucket's capturing some of that growth. Oh, the market's going really bad. Well, great. My now and soon bucket were built for this reason. You can always participate in the ups and downs. And you're exactly right, Matt. The market does go up and down. We've seen that, many times over the past couple of years, end of 2008, beginning of 2009, end of 2018, beginning of this year. It's expected that we're going to get some big, ups and downs. This strategy just allows us to kind of cover all angles without going all in to one strategy.
And I want to talk about that because this is where a lot of your competition talks about how they want to keep you 100% liquid And when clients apply pressure to advisors to get out of the market, I mean, advisors generally have to oblige because they haven't set up this bucket strategy. When you have clients come in and talk about other financial planning and investment management strategies, how easy is it for you to overcome those as not necessarily as beneficial to them when you look at somebody's portfolio, when you talk to them about what they want to be when they retire? Help us with that.
A lot of people, when they come to me, they already have financial advisors, and things might be going okay. They might be getting decent returns, but they might be missing out on something, looking for something a little different. At the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned that, I don't just focus on investments, and that's true. And that's why I build these bucket strategies, because some of the things that I'm looking for are, how do we solve for our Social Security decisions, and what are some tax ideas that we might want to, consider and consult with our CPA on. There's no one right way, I will say, to invest your money. There's a bunch of different types of investments and strategies that will work. But why I like to educate people on the bucket strategy is because there's something comforting about it in its ease of understanding. I used to plug things into the computer and print out, complicated reports and try and explain that, those to my clients. And I found that converting over to this much easier way to understand your finances, and by no means, I guess, lacking in value or thought or strategy, I've just found this resonates with people. And at the end of the day, I am employed and hired by people as an advisor to give advice, put myself in their shoes, display, pros and cons, just allow my clients to, one, either trust the recommendation that I'm providing, or me empower them to ultimately make their own decision. So you're right. If somebody calls up to liquidate their account, I first want to revisit the bucket strategy, try and assure them that, I think that this might not be the best thing to do for XYZ reason. But at the end of the day, my clients are always in the driver's seat, and I will always honor what they want to do, what they want to invest in. I am just here to throw the kitchen sink at it, so to speak, and give them all the tools and my abilities to give them the information, to make good and comfortable decisions.
There are many advisors out there, Mason, who love the complexity of their strategy. And they use all sorts of, acronyms and big words and industry jargon to make themselves come across as being better than other financial services professionals. But what I'm hearing from you is overcomplicated doesn't mean better. If I don't understand how my money's invested, then I can't really truly participate in my investment decisions, can I?
That's such a great point, Matt. And investing is, even though there's so many different types of investments out there, there's like over 20,000 mutual funds. There's definitely a lot of decisions to make, but investing it's not rocket science. I really try and combat all that industry jargon, and I really want my clients to know what we're going to do here, and the decisions and strategies we're going to make. It's nothing that you realistically can't do yourself, to be honest. The clients want me to do it for them, and there's something about that human interaction and being able to talk through the strategy with somebody. But what I'm doing is I don't want it to seem super complicated, because what I find is that when clients, and then I've learned this from people, talking to me and coming to my office, when people are confused by what the advisor's saying, and it just seems like, they can't grasp their head around it, what those individuals end up doing is nothing. They make no changes. Even if the change is really needed, they're paralyzed by the information. So I want to simplify it, make this a really easy to understand process, and show clients, hey, here's Here's how your current now, soon, and later bucket is set up. And here's, in order to, provide for the now bucket, 12 months of funding, the soon bucket, 10 years of funding, these are the tweaks we need to make. It makes it so much easier rather than me just saying, invest all your money with me. I'm going to do all these complicated things, blah, blah, blah. I don't like to fix what isn't broken. There's a lot of times clients will come to me and there's a portion of their portfolio that fits really nicely in one of these buckets and it's been doing totally fine. Well, great. Let's leave it there and let's just rebalance you to build these buckets. So no matter what happens, we're covered.
What should I have asked you about the bucket strategy that I haven't asked you before we wrap up today's podcast?
I think one good question, and I get this sometimes, and I really appreciate the question when people ask me, why did I decide to use this strategy versus other ones that are out there, or versus, using a software or something like that? And not only does this kind of way of this bucket plan, bucket strategy, not only is it really easy to understand, but I find that actually more thought and more analysis on my part goes into building these buckets than I think what goes into plugging your numbers into an online software. What I mean by that, and some specific examples are in some of these softwares online that a lot of advisors might use. It's really just, it's kind of cash flow based, which just means all that's being done is you're plugging, here's how much is in my 401k, here's how much income I need. And the software is just trying to determine if you're going to run out of money in your 80s or if you're going to make it till age 105 with your money. I find that, okay, that's good and important to know. And I do that behind the scenes when building this bucket plan. But people want to know how everything comes together. Okay, yeah, I'm invested correctly, but where does Social Security come into play? And if I'm going to collect Social Security, what does that mean for my investments? Can I be taking more risk or move more money into my later bucket if I do collect Social Security because I don't need that much money around anymore? Well, those are great questions that I find aren't easily solved by looking at the outputs of a computer software, but they're easier solved in this now bucket. And it just makes it, again, so much easier on the emotional side to have something this simple in place, but also this powerful and such a kind of a time-tested strategy as well.
Mason, if somebody wants to find out a little bit more about how they can implement the bucket strategy into their long-term retirement plan, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, I'd say my business Facebook page, actually. There's an appointment tab on there. It's got all my contact info too. And if everybody just searches Mason Gorris InvestWise Financial, I'll show right up and you can get in contact me through that. I never charge for first appointments. I think that's something that's so important because people don't know what they need or what they don't know or what their concerns are. So the first step is always just talking, getting to know each other. And then we can, discuss further about actually building a bucket plan as well.
And make sure that you follow him on Facebook also, because Mason is consistently sharing great information so that you can make better investment decisions. Mason, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed the time.
This is Matt Halloran, and for the Simply Advised podcast, we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.
Thank you for listening to the Simply Advised podcast. Click on the link to subscribe to our podcast and learn more about how we can help you become more confident and informed about your financial choices.
Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member of FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. InvestWise Financial and Cambridge are not affiliated. 3883 Telegraph Road, Suite 204, Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, 48302.